Bikers bully a fisherman's daughter, unaware her father is a former Navy SEAL. The September sun hung low over Tides Harbor, painting the weathered docks in hues of amber and gold. Hannah Collins moved with practiced grace along the wooden pier, her honey-brown hair catching the dying light as she secured the moorings on her father's fishing boat, the Steadfast. At 23, Hannah's delicate features belied a strength forged by years on the water. Her hands, though small, were calloused and sure, the hands of someone who understood both beauty and labor. She hummed softly to herself, tasting salt on her lips as she worked. The marina had emptied early today. Most of the local fishermen had already headed home to their families, leaving only the gentle lapping of waves and distant cry of gulls to keep her company. Or so she thought. The rumble of motorcycle engines shattered the tranquility, echoing across the water like rolling thunder. Hannah straightened, brushing her hands against worn jeans as she turned toward the sound. 5 motorcycles rolled into the parking lot adjacent to the docks, chrome glinting menacingly in the fading light. The Steel Vipers. Everyone in Tides Harbor knew of them, a motorcycle gang that had moved into the county last spring, bringing trouble wherever they went. Hannah had heard stories, vandalism, intimidation, fights at local bars. But until now, they'd left the marina alone. She turned back to her work, hoping they were just passing through. The familiar weight of her father's satellite phone pressed against her hip in her jacket pocket. Daniel had insisted she carry it whenever she worked on the boat alone. Just in case, he'd said with that knowing look in his eyes, the one that reminded her there was much more to Daniel Collins than most people in town ever realized. Heavy boots thudded against wood. Hannah didn't need to look up to know they were approaching. Well, what do we have here? The voice was deep, amused, and unmistakably threatening. Hannah secured the final knot before turning. 5 men stood in a loose semicircle, blocking her path back to shore. Their leather vests displayed the Steel Viper's emblem, a coiled serpent wrapped around a dagger. The speaker, positioned slightly ahead of the others, was tall with a shaved head and a thick beard. Tattoos crawled up his neck and across his knuckles, which read hate and fear. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Hannah kept her voice steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. The leader, Drake, she'd later learn, smiled, revealing a gold tooth. "Nice boat. Your daddy's, I'm guessing." His gaze slid over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Pretty little thing like you can't be running this operation alone." The men behind him snickered. "The marina's closed for the day," Hannah said, taking a step back. "If you're interested in chartering a fishing trip, you can come back tomorrow morning." Drake took another step forward. "We're not here for fishing, sweetheart. Word is, this marina sits on prime real estate. Our business associates are very interested in acquiring it." "The marina isn't for sale," Hannah replied, her back now against the boat's hull. "It's been in local hands for generations." "Everything's for sale," Drake said, "for the right price. Or with the right persuasion." The other men spread out, effectively surrounding her. "Maybe you could convince your old man it's time to retire, before something unfortunate happens." Hannah's fingers closed around the satellite phone in her pocket. She knew her father was at the Veterans Center in town, barely 10 minutes away. But calling him felt like admitting defeat, like proving she couldn't handle this herself. "My father isn't interested in selling," she said firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to finish." Drake's amusement vanished. "I don't think you understand the situation, girl." He reached out, grabbing her wrist. "We're not asking." Hannah jerked away, but his grip tightened painfully. "Let go of me," she hissed, abandoning any pretense of politeness. "Or what?" Drake sneered. "You gonna swim for it?" The satellite phone slipped from Hannah's fingers as she struggled, clattering onto the dock. One of the other men, rail-thin with a rat-tail braid and sunken eyes, stooped to pick it up. "Well, what's this?" he drawled, examining it. "Trying to call for help?" "Give that back, Razor," Drake ordered, reaching for the device. Hannah's breath caught. If they destroyed the phone, her connection to help would be severed. But instead of smashing it, Drake turned it over in his hands, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Let's see who she was calling, shall we?" He pressed the redial button, putting the phone to his ear. After a moment, his smile widened. "Hello there. Who am I speaking with?" A pause. "Well, Daniel, your daughter's having a bit of trouble down at the marina. Maybe you should come see for yourself." Hannah's stomach dropped. Her father was coming, which meant this situation was about to escalate beyond her control. Drake ended the call, tossing the phone back to her with unexpected carelessness. "Daddy's on his way. Maybe he'll be more reasonable about our business proposition." "You're making a mistake," Hannah said quietly. Drake laughed. "Am I now?" What's Daddy going to do? Call the sheriff. He leaned closer. By the time they get here, we'll have made our point quite clear. It's not the sheriff you should worry about, Hannah murmured. The bikers settled into wait, lounging against pilings and passing a flask between them. Hannah remained still, calculating distances and options. She could make a run for it, but that would mean leaving the boat, and her father would be arriving soon anyway. Better to stay put and wait. 10 minutes passed in tense silence before they heard another engine, this one the familiar rumble of her father's old truck. The bikers straightened, turning toward the parking area where headlights cut through the gathering dusk. Daniel Collins stepped onto the dock with the fluid grace of a much younger man. At 53, his hair had gone silver at the temples, and weather lines mapped his face. He wore faded jeans and a simple flannel shirt rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle. Nothing about him appeared remarkable, just another weather-beaten fisherman in a coastal town. But Hannah knew better. And soon, the Steel Vipers would too. Evening, Daniel called, his voice carrying easily across the distance. His tone was pleasant, almost friendly, but Hannah recognized the dangerous stillness in his posture. He approached unhurriedly, hands loose at his sides. Seems like you gentlemen are having a conversation with my daughter. Drake stepped forward, clearly sizing up the older man and finding nothing to concern him. Just a business discussion, old-timer. About the future of this marina. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. I see. Hannah, you all right? I'm fine, Dad. Her voice was steadier now that he was here. Daniel's eyes, the same shade of green as Hannah's, never left Drake's face. Then I'll take it from here. You head on up to the truck. Dada. Now, please, Hannah. There was no room for argument in his voice. Hannah slipped past the bikers, who parted with surprising ease to let her through. Perhaps they sensed the shift in the air, the subtle change in atmosphere that comes when a predator enters the scene. We were just explaining to your daughter, Drake continued, that this place would be better off under new management. Our associates are prepared to make a very generous offer. Daniel nodded again, as if considering. And if I'm not interested in selling? Drake's smile turned ugly. Then things might get uncomfortable for you and your pretty daughter. I see. Daniel sighed, a sound of genuine regret. That's unfortunate. What happened next occurred so quickly that later, when Hannah tried to describe it to the sheriff, she found herself struggling for words. One moment, Drake was standing confidently before her father. The next, he was on his knees, face contorted in pain, her father's hand wrapped around his wrist in a grip that bent it at an unnatural angle. The other bikers surged forward, but they might as well have been moving through molasses compared to Daniel Collins. The closest man, Razor, swung a heavy chain, which Daniel caught mid-arc, yanking the man off balance before delivering a precise strike to his sternum that left him gasping on the dock. Two more rushed him simultaneously. Daniel pivoted between them, redirecting one into the other before sweeping the legs out from under both. They crashed to the weathered planks with dull thuds. The fifth man, seeing his companions dispatched so efficiently, hesitated just long enough for Daniel to close the distance and immobilize him with what looked to Hannah like nothing more than a firm grip on the back of his neck. In less than 20 seconds, all 5 Steel Vipers were down, groaning, or frozen in pain-induced compliance. Daniel stood among them, breathing evenly, not even-winded. Now, he said conversationally, about that business proposal. Drake glared up at him, blood trickling from his nose. Who the hell are you? Just a fisherman, Daniel replied, who spent 22 years as a Navy SEAL before retiring to raise his daughter and run this marina. He increased the pressure on Drake's wrist slightly, causing the man to hiss in pain. Which means I've dealt with far worse than you and your friends. Distant sirens wailed, growing louder. Hannah realized someone at one of the nearby boats must have witnessed the confrontation and called the authorities. You're about to have a choice to make, Daniel continued calmly. The sheriff will be here shortly. Assaulting my daughter and threatening a business owner will put most of you back in prison, I imagine. He glanced around at the group. Or what? Razor spat, still struggling to catch his breath. Or I know people who run a veterans rehabilitation program. They work with troubled men, teach them skills, help them find legitimate work. It's not easy, harder than prison in some ways, but it offers something prison doesn't. What's that? Asked one of the younger bikers, a hint of genuine curiosity in his voice. A second chance, Daniel said simply, and a purpose beyond this. He gestured at their vests, their gang symbols. The sheriff's cruiser pulled into the marina parking lot, followed by 2 more patrol cars. Sheriff Winslow, A tall woman with steel-gray hair and 30 years of law enforcement experience approached the scene with her hand resting on her holstered weapon. "Daniel," she acknowledged with a nod. "Got a report of trouble." "Just a misunderstanding, Sheriff," Daniel replied, releasing Drake and stepping back. These gentlemen were about to leave. Sheriff Winslow raised an eyebrow. "That's so?" Her gaze traveled over the disheveled bikers, noting their various states of discomfort. "Looks like more than a misunderstanding to me." Daniel met her eyes. "They made threats." I responded, "But I think we've reached an understanding now, haven't we?" Drake rubbed his wrist, hatred burning in his eyes. But he nodded curtly. "Actually," the youngest biker said hesitantly, "I'd like to hear more about that program." Drake rounded on him. "Shut your mouth, Liam." "No." Liam straightened. "I'm done with this, man. 3 years I've followed you, and what do I have to show for it? 2 arrests and a restraining order from my own family." He turned to Daniel. "This program, it's real?" Daniel nodded. "Real and effective. I can put you in touch with the coordinator tonight." 2 more of the bikers exchanged glances. Maybe we should check it out too," one of them said cautiously. Drake's face contorted with rage. "You're all turning soft on me? Over one old man?" "One old man who just put all 5 of us on the ground without breaking a sweat," Razor pointed out pragmatically. "But count me out of any rehabilitation nonsense. I know who I am." He spat on the dock. Sheriff Winslow stepped forward. "Here's how this is going to play out. Mr. Collins, do you want to press charges?" Daniel looked at Hannah, who had returned to stand beside him. She studied the bikers, Drake's seething anger, Razor's cold hatred, but also Liam's uncertain hope and the considering expressions of the others. "No charges," she said softly. "But they need to stay away from the marina." Daniel squeezed her shoulder gently. "You heard my daughter. No charges, Sheriff. But I'd appreciate if you'd escort these gentlemen back to wherever they came from, with the understanding that they're no longer welcome here." "And those interested in the program?" Winslow asked. "Can meet me at the Veterans Center tomorrow morning." Daniel turned to the bikers. 9 a.m. Sharp. Liam nodded. After a moment of hesitation, 2 others, introduced as Beck and Milo, nodded as well. As the sheriff led the Steel Vipers away, Drake turned back, his eyes locking with Daniel's. "This isn't over, Collins," he said, voice low enough that only Daniel, Hannah, and Sheriff Winslow could hear. "For your sake," Daniel replied quietly, "I hope it is." Later that night, as Hannah and her father sat on the porch of their small house overlooking the harbor, she finally asked the question that had been bothering her. Why offer them help? After what they did, what they threatened to do? Daniel was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant lights of boats bobbing gently on the water. "When I was in the teams," he began, using the SEAL colloquialism, "I saw a lot of young men like them. Full of anger, looking for belonging, finding it in all the wrong places." He sipped his tea. "Violence is easy, Hannah. Redemption is the harder path." "But they chose to be criminals," Hannah argued. "They threatened me, threatened our home." "Yes, they did." Daniel's voice hardened momentarily. "And if they'd actually harmed you, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But they didn't." He set his mug down. "Most people are capable of change, given the right circumstances and motivation. Not all, some are too far gone. But enough to make the effort worthwhile." Hannah considered this. "You think Liam will show up tomorrow?" Daniel smiled. "I know he will. The others, we'll see." True to Daniel's prediction, Liam arrived at the Veterans Center at 8:45 the next morning, nervously clutching a coffee cup. To everyone's surprise, Beck and Milo showed up as well, though they hung back, uncertain. By afternoon, all 3 had enrolled in the program under the watchful eye of Marcus Fitzgerald, a retired Marine Corps sergeant who had built the rehabilitation initiative from nothing 5 years earlier. But as September gave way to October, it became clear that Drake and Razor hadn't accepted defeat. Reports filtered in of Steel Viper members watching the marina from a distance. A week later, someone slashed the tires on Daniel's truck. Sheriff Winslow increased patrols, but with limited resources and no concrete evidence, there was little else she could do. The situation came to a head on a chilly evening in late October. Hannah was closing up the bait shop alone when she noticed a familiar figure walking along the dock. "Liam," she called, surprised. The young man had been diligently attending the program, according to Marcus, but hadn't returned to the marina until now. He approached cautiously. "Hannah, I need to talk to your father. It's urgent." Something in his tone sent a chill down her spine. "What's wrong?" Liam glanced over his shoulder. "Drake's planning something. Tonight." "Him, Razor, and some new guys they recruited from upstate. They're going to burn the boats, maybe the whole marina. Hannah's blood ran cold. How do you know this? Razor got drunk at the bar where my cousin works. Couldn't stop bragging about it. Liam's eyes were earnest. I'm not with them anymore, Hannah. None of us are Beck, Milo, even a couple others have joined the program. What your dad did for us. He shook his head. We can't let them destroy this place. Hannah didn't hesitate. She locked the shop and pulled out her phone, calling her father first, then Sheriff Winslow. But the sheriff was dealing with a multi-car accident on the highway. It would be at least an hour before deputies could reach the marina. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit community. By nightfall, the marina hummed with quiet activity as fishermen, shop owners, and residents took up positions among the boats and buildings. Daniel moved among them, organizing, advising, his military experience evident in every calm instruction. We're not looking for a fight, he reminded the assembled defenders. Our goal is to protect the marina and prevent anyone from getting hurt, including them. Understood. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. Hannah noticed Liam, Beck, and Milo standing slightly apart, uncomfortable but determined. They had the most to lose if this went badly, their places in the rehabilitation program, their second chances. They didn't have to wait long. Just after midnight, the rumble of motorcycles announced the arrival of the Steel Vipers. Headlights swept across the parking lot as 8 bikes rolled in, their riders dismounting with the confidence of those expecting no resistance. Drake led them toward the docks, Razor at his side. Each carried a gas can. The others followed with various weapons, chains, bats, one with what looked like a homemade torch. They made it halfway across the main dock before Daniel stepped out of the shadows, blocking their path. That's far enough, Drake. Drake's surprise quickly morphed into sneering confidence. Just you, old man? Brave, but stupid. In answer, figures emerged from boats and behind storage sheds all around the marina, 30 or more community members armed with floodlights, which now illuminated the bikers in harsh white glare. Drake faltered, but quickly recovered. You think a bunch of fishermen scare us? We've dealt with worse. Perhaps, Daniel agreed. But have you dealt with them? He gestured behind the bikers, where Sheriff Winslow now stood with 4 deputies, having arrived through a back entrance to the marina. And us, Liam added, stepping forward with Beck and Milo. We know all your moves, Drake. All your weaknesses. Drake's face contorted with rage as he recognized his former gang members. Traitors, he spat. No, Liam responded calmly. Just men who found something better. For a tense moment, it seemed Drake might still order an attack. But surrounded, outnumbered, and cut off from escape, even he could see the futility. With a curse, he dropped the gas can and raised his hands. As the deputies moved in to arrest the would-be arsonists, Razor suddenly broke away, sprinting down the dock toward where Hannah stood. Before anyone could react, he grabbed her, pressing a knife to her throat. Nobody move, he shouted, or she bleeds out right here. Hannah went very still, feeling the cold steel against her skin. Her eyes found her father's across the distance between them. Daniel's face betrayed no emotion, but Hannah saw his fingers flex slightly, a subtle signal they had established years ago during his lessons on self-defense. 3, 2, 1. Hannah dropped her weight suddenly, ducking her head forward and to the side. The movement was just enough to break Razor's grip for a critical second, all Daniel needed to close the distance and deliver a precise strike that sent the knife clattering to the dock. A second blow left Razor unconscious at their feet. In the aftermath, as deputies led the Steel Vipers away and community members celebrated with handshakes and relieved laughter, Hannah found herself beside Liam, watching her father speak with Sheriff Winslow. He's not what I expected, Liam said quietly. Hannah smiled. He rarely is. A man like that, with his skills, his background, he could have killed us all that first night. Or let us go to prison. Liam shook his head. Instead, he offered us a way out. That's who he is, Hannah replied simply. He believes in second chances. Even for people like me? Like Drake. Hannah considered this. Drake made his choice tonight. But you made yours too. She touched his arm lightly. That's what matters in the end. Not where you started, but where you choose to go from there. 6 months later, Hannah stood on the deck of the Steadfast, watching as a small crowd gathered on the newly rebuilt main dock of Tides Harbor Marina. A banner stretched across the entrance to what had once been a dilapidated storage building, Collins Veteran Support Center. The center had been Liam's idea, but Beck and Milo had championed it, and together with the other former Steel Vipers who had completed the rehabilitation program, they had raised funds, contributed labor. and transformed the space into something meaningful. Daniel stood before the gathered community members, looking uncomfortable with the attention but proud of what had been accomplished. Hannah smiled as he fumbled with the ceremonial scissors, finally managing to cut the ribbon to applause and cheers. Later, as the celebration continued, Hannah found her father standing at the end of the dock, gazing out over the water. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, leaning against the railing beside him. Daniel smiled, just thinking about choices and consequences. 6 months ago, this dock was nearly destroyed by men consumed by anger. Now those same men helped build something that will serve this community for years to come. Hannah followed his gaze to where Liam was showing a group of veterans the new computer lab inside the center. Not all of them. Drake and Razor are still in prison. Yes, Daniel acknowledged. Some choices lead to places from which it's harder to return. He turned to face her. But the door is never completely closed. That's what I tried to teach you all these years, what my time in service taught me. Every day offers new choices, new paths. Hannah slipped her arm through his. "You taught me well, Dad." As the sun began to set over Tide's harbor, painting the water in familiar hues of gold and amber, Hannah thought about strength, not just the physical prowess her father had demonstrated against the Steel Vipers, but the deeper, more profound strength it took to offer redemption instead of retribution, to see potential where others saw only threat. In the fading light, with the sounds of celebration behind them and the gentle lapping of waves before them, Hannah realized that this moment of transformation, of community, of second chances, was her father's true legacy. Not the combat skills of a Navy SEAL, but the heart of a man who understood that the most powerful force for change wasn't violence, but compassion. And in that understanding lay the real guardian of Tide's harbor.